Coogs House, another season comes to an abrupt close. Let's talk about it for a second.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, that one was tough. Houston falls 54-51 to Duke. Lots to talk about in this one. I think there's a lot of different takey things that Houston people could be wanting to say or things that people could be wanting to do. But honestly, I want to avoid trying to get into any of that. Obviously, we're going to talk some about what this means for Houston, talk some about the X's and O's of the game. But first and foremost, we're going to make sure that we look at what happened in this game in terms of Jamal Shead. Obviously, the storyline of the game, the key to the game was losing Jamal Shead. Jamal Shead suffered an ankle injury just under the 7-minute mark in the first half, did not return, was seen scootering around on his little injury scooter, not unlike JoJo Tugler or earlier in the season, Terrence Arsenault. Effectively the third season-ending injury for the Cougars this season. The fourth, if you count that we thought Ramon Walker was going to be one of those as well. I didn't even ask my daily question. Daily question in the PG version, how are you feeling? Vent about it, talk about it in the comments. Don't let me hold you back, but please keep it a little PG. So Shead's injury being a key to the game, I think, is almost too simple, but it was obvious in the stadium that the air got taken out for the rest of the first half. Houston was up when he went down and entered the half down a point or down a basket. And frankly, it felt like everyone was just kind of breathing a sigh of relief at halftime that it was just that. Everyone is hopeful at halftime that it was just going to be taped up and okay, good to go. Did not help to see Alan Bishop, shrink coach, walk back on the floor without Jamal Shead before the half was over. Did not help to be told at halftime by some media members that he was on the scooter. Before I get into what this meant, the injury and why it was a key to the game, I got to say I feel so bad for Jamal. I obviously got a little bit of a bias myself. I think a lot of people would have him down as a player of the year candidate. Big 12 player of the year for sure. I'm talking about the national level. First team All-American, first year in the Big 12, representing Maynard, Texas to the fullest, doing a lot of big things this season. And it ends with him unable to play. He's on the bench with his sweatshirt over his head, just upset, and it's just awful. A guy that I will make a firm case he's to have his jersey hung up in the rafters or on the wall there at Fertitta, and doesn't matter tonight. He can't go for more than half of the basketball game, and Houston was feeling it. Houston was missing him big time. Honestly, I think the biggest thing you could tell from this team was he's the leader of the team on offense. Houston's defense played all right. But I think there were times where they needed a bucket or this. Or actually, I take that back. The biggest thing was the leadership, the qualitative stuff, the calming the team down and easing things down when Duke starts to make a run. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here by saying I think Houston wins by double digits if he's healthy. They were kind of on that track when he went down. I don't think Duke had a guy that could cover him, which meant they haven't been to the ball. And at that point, it's lights out. You're getting the Francis lob. You're getting J1 a put back. You're getting a kick out three to Cry. You're getting all kinds of options that didn't happen. But I think the big thing is that leadership that was missing. When Duke makes their run, makes their tough shot, you come down and he has a calming presence because he's done this all before. And not having that, not that guys in the roster hadn't done it before. J1's done it before, right? Ramon's been in the game in this situation before. Sharp was here last year. Cryer's done it in other rosters. Just missed him, right? Just missed him. Again, schematically on offense, I do think there's a big hole when he's not there. We talked this year ad nauseum some about the idea of not really having a true backup point guard, and that hurt a lot. I would point out, and I was sitting next to Dustin from Scott and Holman podcast, and he and I talked for a second about honestly, at some level, it sucks to lose another body. Obviously, losing the best player in the country hurts a lot, but losing another body like that's a problem because, frankly, you didn't have a whole lot of bodies to go. They came up to warm up in the second half. It looked like they had like 8 guys healthy enough to warm up at halftime. That's just tough. Now, schematically, the offense without Jamal, because it was having trouble, went to their late shot clock stuff. They'd waste 15 seconds to kind of slow the game down, limit possessions, etc. The problem was without Jamal, that offense relies on a lot of precision execution. Houston had a couple late turnovers and a couple this and a couple that. I don't want to sit on the negative with that. I want to point out this team, without the best player in America, without their first 2 guys off the bench, without a lot of things going their way that are out of their control. Injuries just happen sometimes. Team was within a shot of going to the Elite Eight. I mean, Manu Sharp hits that 3, goes to overtime. Crowd was a lot of Houston fans. No reason they couldn't have carried through overtime. I think that's something to be proud of. I think that is a mark of a good culture and a good program. And I'll ride with that. It's hard to say that right now. It's hard to be optimistic right now because that just sucks. But, man, you played a great defensive game, and you can't get anything going on offense because your best players hurt, and that's how March goes. Houston knows that all too well. I'm going to try and do comments from the phone. I'm recording from my phone right now. I got to sit in fan seats. I want to shout out to Michael Brown. Michael Brown hosts the Kiss of Death podcast about the Houston Rockets. U of H alum, great guy. Managed to get some tickets and find me about him. Got to sit with a couple people who knew what they were talking about, which was nice. But I'm doing this from my phone because you can't bring a backpack in as a non-media person. Comments here. Ooh, this is hard to do with a phone. Walker and Cryer the same amount of 3-point attempts. That was a problem. Offensive creation was a problem without Jamal Shead. Duke wasn't in their shots. I would credit Houston defense making them take tough shots, actually. I thought the defense played fairly well in this game. You kept teams one of the highest scoring teams in America, one of the best offense in America, to 54 points. I'd say it's actually pretty impressive. Lost the offensive catalyst. Agreed. Oh, well, it's tough. This is far better than going a decade without being in the tournament. Agreed. If we're trying to be optimistic and positive, that's an easy way to look at it. Asking about the offense getting conservative, I think we've seen this sometimes before in close games where Houston spends a lot of shot clock to shorten the game. I think they went to that really early in this one because Jamal Shead was out. And it just didn't work. It's hard to win games without your best player. Worst part is Duke didn't play well in the game. It was called favorably relatively to the Aggie game. You know, there were calls I disagreed with for sure. I would point to a couple times I thought Duke was taking a lot of extra steps, and a lot of those pump fakes, the extra steps work extra well. But on the whole, I'm not upset about a whole lot of calls. I do think that Duke got a little favorable whistle, but that's not why they won that game. They won the game because Jamal Shead was out. Now, I'm supposed to pause to talk to you about a buddy of ours right now over at Nissan. Nissan has, if I can pull it up right fast, Nissan's got a slew of great SUVs in 2024 that are rugged and tough and good for any environment. After watching Houston play that game as rugged and tough as they were, I feel like fairly firmly they could be put into any of those SUVs across the board. All kinds of adventures with this team, all kinds of adventures with Nissan. So make sure you check out a Nissan today at shopnissanusa.com. Another one of our buddies I'm supposed to tell you a little bit about as we keep it going here is actually a new friend of ours at Manscaped. You'll notice I'm a little clean shaven. Manscaped's got the best razors for the best prices for all of your grooming. And when I say all, I mean all. If you want to feel fresh, and I mean extra fresh, make sure you check out Manscaped. Go to manscaped.com. Use code Locked On for $20 off, 20% off, and free shipping. That's 20% off and free shipping. Use code Locked On at manscaped.com today. All right, now as I go through this, I want to spend this time talking a little bit about what else happened in this basketball game. Man, it's just hard to get to like the X's and O's and stuff and without thinking about like the qualitative elements of it. Houston did in this game, I think, try to execute some things. I think it's interesting that they did not shoot very many three-pointers in the basketball game. They slowed it down and really tried to attack the rim. I thought when Jamal Shead went out, it was very apparent they tried to go to Jawan Roberts in the post, get him in some isolation type stuff, and he performed, frankly. He had a couple miscues here and there, but on the whole, I'd say that he played a pretty solid basketball game offensively. The deal was she had a couple key turnovers of guards because she didn't have your best point guard out there. Offense got stagnant at times, stuck on one side of the floor at times. Duke's defense able to set up and sit for stretches, and it didn't have to make a whole lot of rotations because the guy that penetrates those rotations, honestly, was on the bench with his ankle taped all up because it was hurt. So I'm trying to stick with X's and O's for a second. The people I was sitting with, we talked for a second, again, a couple other podcasters in the bunch. And I think we all noticed very quickly without Jamal Shead getting in the lane off the bounce, meaning dribbling in the paint to penetrate and force defense, getting rotations into the ball, etc., was hard to do. You had to get a true screen. Houston's pick and pop options were fairly limited. Ramon Walker to hit a three, I guess, if you're looking at him as one. But on the whole, it was hard to get some action out of that. So you really relied a lot on traditional two-pointers, getting to the foul line. Houston shot 50% from the free throw line, 8 of 16, if I'm correct. It's probably right behind me. 9 of 17, just over 50%. Not great, especially when you lose by 3. It's going to be kind of haunting. I will say the story of the Houston Cougars free throw shooting all year has been that, unfortunately, they've got some guys that are not very good at them, and they've got some guys that are more often than not, because the way Houston was having to score the basketball by pounding the ball inside, they're lesser free throw shooters at the line. JVR missed 2 in a row. One was the air ball. It was really ugly. Again, execution things, not effort things, but it was ugly to say the least. I will say, as I watch this, and I want to pull up Brian's comment here. He's so proud to be a Coug fan and proud of the boys to get the opportunity to even be having these discussions at this time of the year. Forever Cougs, love and respect, thank you. I would agree with Brian on a lot of fronts. As we look at this Houston Cougar basketball program, honestly, I don't think anyone had us being a 1 seed in our first year in the Big 12 and all of that. I don't think anyone would have had us losing to a blue blood like Duke, down our best player, down our first 2 guys off the bench, and all those kinds of fashions. Victor points out he's proud of the guys. Best corner ever, says only up from here. I appreciate the positivity. I know you got a lot of options in Houston podcasting, and they range in a various amount of things. I try to stay positive because this program is so strong and built the right way. I really do try to stay positive the best I can. It's just hard after feeling like someone's taken from you. I think a worthy discussion that James Mueller brought up on Twitter. This is the 3rd March in a row, and all 3 being since going to the Final Four in 2021, that you've been missing some of the, tools in your arsenal at this time of year. Honestly, it's hard to adjust in all those instances. I almost feel like tonight is the hardest to adjust to, not just because you were missing Terrence and JoJo, not just because Jawan's playing banged up through a bunch of injuries, but losing Jamal mid-game, I mean, that's tough. You're trying to make halftime adjustments just to play, as well as trying to cover up losing your point guard, losing your best player. Really, really challenging compared to those other previous years. And I also want to give hats off to Duke. I probably need to give them some credit as well. Give me one more thing. Duke is a tough basketball team. They played more physical than I thought they would, and I'll be open about that. I thought they'd get out physical in this game. There were a lot of moments they felt like they were rising to the challenge. I still think Houston was clearly the more physical team. That's why they kept it as close as they did. But Duke was impressive. Certainly was more so than I would have thought. I feel like Duke NC State's going to be an interesting game on Sunday. NC State, I watched before this. NC State's interesting. Houston NC State would have been interesting. Unfortunately, we won't get to see it. Man, oh man, how many ways can you say it sucks to lose Jamal Shead in the middle of a basketball game? How many different ways? I've said a lot of one more things, but in the final segment, I do want to talk some about March Madness and where things go from here. I got people asking about that in the comment section, it looks like, as well. But before we get to all that, I would just point out this run Houston had, I mean, to even start the year off the way they did and losing everybody over the course of the season, but to get to March Madness, I would say Longwood, again, as I talked to you all about before the first game of the tournament, Longwood was really more like a 14 seeder. So play them in the first round and beat them with a statement. Big statement win over A&M. Tough game, especially the way they've been playing the last 5 or 6 weeks. Coming here to play Duke. Again, you gave them all they wanted, everything they wanted in this basketball game. Just a rough way to go about it. I'm not going to be nitpicky. I keep wanting to talk about the things that went wrong, but I feel like that belabors it. Houston played their butts off in a game where they lost their best player, and I don't want to get too nitpicky and negative. I got a guy over here asking about what comes next for this team. Duke's height advantage, I guess what that was probably going to be about. What's the big difference? No Shed, only lose by 3. Questions about next year. Keep Chopping says both teams fought hard. It's a great game. Condolences, Big 12 and Yormark 19 Elite 8. That is interesting. I feel fairly confident that that's just the craziness and chaos of March. March is a weird system, weird madness. James Rice says, feels so bad for our guys. Injuries aren't, unfortunately, a part of the game. Agreed. It just feels like it's part of our game a lot. And I think that's what hurts, is it's another special team, another special group that unfortunately got cut short. Now, before we go too far, talk a little bit about our buddies over at FanDuel. FanDuel's America's #1 sportsbook, and they got all kinds of things to keep you busy in March. If you're looking for ways to be interested in games from here on out, now that Houston is no longer dancing, obviously FanDuel has ways you can keep making each game interesting and keep up to date on the latest and with all kinds of props and over-unders and stuff like that. So go to FanDuel.com/locked-on, put a $5 bet down. That bet hits. You can win $200 back in bonus bets this March. Make sure to check them out today. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right. Questions about where we go from here I think are interesting. I got to be honest. In the first, 13 minutes of that basketball game, I thought we were playing Sunday. And there were stretches of the second half where I was like, I think they're going to pull it out. I think they can still figure this out. And then they did not. On the whole, I think we got to evaluate as guys declare for the pros. Every single senior is technically eligible to return because of COVID years and things like that. So technically, while it was a very busy senior day, Houston does have a lot of roster to sort out who wants to go pro, who wants to stay, etc. The biggest question there to me is Jamal Shead, obviously, not just because of the injury tonight, but ultimately because he's the most realistic pro prospect. I'm seeing him as a late first-round pick on some boards and a mid-second-round pick on others. If he is deemed a second-round pick because of his size, I think there is actually an outside chance he returns. Second-round picks are not guaranteed money. Second-round picks are not guaranteed jobs. He's got, he's in the top 10 in NIL money in all of college basketball. He loves this program. This program loves him. So I would keep an eye on that. I'm not speaking for anybody out of turn. And maybe it's part of me that just does not want that to be the last time we see Jamal Shead in a Houston Cougar basketball uniform. That would be tough. Now, as I look at the rest of the roster, I think the deal is like Jalen Roberts is not quite big enough to be a, traditional power forward or center at the next level. As he come back, continue to work his game into a stretch four. Um, Other seniors like Damian Dunn, kind of projecting positions can be hard. So we got to see who comes and who goes. Last year we got surprised with Tremont joining the transfer portal, so I guess we got to watch those things as well. I will say, as far as next year's point guard goes, youth will be the name of the game. Cordell is really, really strong, really, really tough kid. Going to remind you a lot of some guys you had the last 2 years. He just got redshirted this year. He actually ended the season with 2 broken wrists. If you remember that story. Didn't realize he had 2 broken wrists. Tough as nails kid from the DFW area. Mercy Miller comes in. He's more of a 2 guard, son of Percy Miller, Master P. He can light it up. I mean, he had crazy scoring numbers this year out in California at the prep circuit. Honestly, I think part of the reason LJ Cryer came to Houston was to have a chance to play some point guard next year, so see how he gets developed into that role. We'll see how these things tend to go. Across the board, I will say, though, that Jamal Shead bounced to the pros. Good for him. I'm not a guy that gets mad about those kinds of things. Kids got to take the opportunity whenever they can. He is going to be hard to replace. Like I said, I think he's the best player in America. I think you saw that tonight, frankly. Houston went from, with all the things they had going, they were still the best team or one of the best teams in America. And they ultimately fall basically because he can't play. And moving forward without him is going to be really, really hard. Really, really hard. Comments flowing in here. Keep Chopping says, crowd seemed decent when compared to the support for a team like NC State. And almost nobody at their game. I will say it was no doubt to anyone in the gym that this was a Houston Cougar gym. For what it's worth, I also think that the people who stayed around from the first game also don't like Duke and NC State and Marquette. But a lot of Cougar red all over. I think it helped to know that, frankly, once Houston had kind of locked up the South Regional, that everyone knew it was going to be in Dallas for a long time. So that helped a lot. Next year, the closest, I don't know if it'd be Atlanta or Indianapolis. A little bit farther trip for the 2 regionals that I would imagine Houston got a shot in. I guess technically the West instead is in San Fran. Yeah, I don't know. I can't even get to next year. What am I talking about? All right. Yeah, we're going to break down a lot more of this between now and Monday morning. That's going to be the next episode is Monday morning. I'm going to take some time. I'm going to go see my 10-month-old for a little bit more, a little bit less basketball to watch. Also have it on the background, but less to pay attention to. I encourage you to do the same, kind of debrief for a second, take some time. Cougar baseball is in Fort Worth. If you're in the DFW area looking for something to do. Softball, I think, is playing BYU this weekend. So all kinds of fun stuff on the horizon for the Houston Cougars. When we get back, we'll obviously be wrapping up basketball. Spring football is well underway. We got to get some eyeballs on that as well. Tough loss to Houston Cougars, and I'm sorry if this has felt like I'm stumbling and kind of at a loss for words. Honestly, it's kind of because I am. Unbelievably proud of this team for getting it as tight as they did. I could be critical of a couple turnovers late from some guards. I could be critical of some missed bunnies or missed free throws. I could be critical of a lot of mistakes made, but on the whole, Houston, without their best player, without their first 2 guys off the bench, just took an Elite 8 team to the wire and had a shot to tie it up. And frankly, had a pretty good shooter shooting it, hard to complain, hard to be negative when that's the reality. I'm host of Locked On Coogs, Parker Ainsworth. It's been a pleasure to talk about Houston Cougar basketball with you all season long. Show doesn't stop, show doesn't slow down, but man, oh man, tonight a tough one. I want to shout out again to Michael Brown of the Kiss of Death podcast, Houston Rockets podcaster, for hooking it up and finding me when he had some seats available. Obviously, this was a fairly simple commute for me to get to, but also just thinking about guys. Thank you, Michael. Good to get to talk to some other podcasters from the Houston realm or up there in the fan seats. I haven't been to a game as a fan in a long time. Yeah. So that was a fun experience, different experience. Kind of hard to kind of switch hats there, frankly. Hard to go back and forth. Anyway, Locked On Cougs is proud of Locked On Podcast. It's your team, our Houston Cougars, that I'm so, so proud of, even amidst a heartbreaking loss each and every day. Go Cougs.